The sound of the snare. The blizzard didn't care about John's schedule. When his truck's heater died and the engine seized in the middle of a whiteout, the Maine wilderness became a wall of white death. Miles from the nearest town, John spotted a dim, flickering light, the Blue Pine Lodge, a cluster of saltbox cabins buried in the snow. The manager was a skeletal man in a heavy wool coat that smelled of mothballs and raw meat. "Phone lines are snapped from the ice," the man said, sliding a heavy iron key across the counter. Cabin 4. Keep the wood stove burning, or the frost will take your fingers by morning. Cabin 4 was a cramped box of cedar and shadows. Exhausted and shivering, John tried to stoke the fire, but the wood was damp. As he leaned down to check the vents behind an old, heavy wardrobe, he noticed a sliver of light where there shouldn't be any. He shoved the wardrobe aside, the wood groaning against the floorboards. Behind it was a small, hand-carved hole in the logs. John pressed his eye to it. On the other side wasn't the outdoors, but a hidden tool shed. Under a single bare bulb, he saw a row of trophies. Winter coats with the name tags ripped off. Frozen sets of car keys. And there, on a workbench, was a collection of glass jars containing frozen fingers, each labeled with a date. The most recent jar was empty, waiting. Clink. The sound of a master key turning in the cabin's heavy door froze John's breath in his lungs. John wasn't a fighter. He was a man in his 50s with stiff joints and lungs that burned from the cold. He didn't dive for cover. He stood paralyzed as the door creaked open, admitting a blast of sub-zero air. He realized he'd left his pocketknife in the truck. His only tool was a heavy iron poker he'd been using for the fire. "It's a cold night to be alone, John," the manager's voice drifted in. He wasn't whispering anymore. He sounded calm, almost bored. "The frost makes the meat tender. If you struggle, it only makes you bruise." The man stepped inside, carrying a heavy tranquilizer rifle used for livestock. John didn't wait. He didn't have a plan, only the raw, animal instinct to survive. He didn't swing the poker. He threw a heavy wool blanket over the man's head and tackled him into the wood stove. It wasn't a clean fight. They tumbled onto the floor, a messy scramble of heavy coats and desperate gasps. The manager bit John's hand, a sharp, human snap. John screamed, grabbed the iron poker, and swung it blindly, hitting the man's shoulder with a sickening crack. John bolted out the door into the waist-deep snow. He was barefoot, his socks soaking through instantly. The cold hit him like a physical blow to the chest. Behind him, he heard the manager howling into the wind, a sound more wolf than man. John didn't head for the road. He knew the manager would look there. Instead, he crawled under the crawlspace of cabin 5. He lay in the frozen dirt, his teeth chattering so hard he feared the sound would give him away. He watched the manager's boots, heavy, fur-lined things, crunch past him in the snow. "I can smell your fear, John. The cold will do my work for me." John found a discarded gallon of kerosene under the cabin. As the manager circled back, John didn't run. He waited until the man was standing right next to the cabin's porch. John splashed the kerosene onto the wooden stairs and struck a damp match. It took 3 tries. On the third, the porch erupted in a wall of orange flame. The manager backed away, shielded from the heat by his heavy coat, but the fire acted as a beacon. 5 miles away, a snowplow driver saw the orange glow against the white sky and radioed it in. By the time the volunteers found him, John was curled in a ball behind a woodpile, his feet blue and his mind drifting into the final sleep of hypothermia. They found the manager in the hidden shed, trying to burn his trophies before the police arrived. John lost 2 toes to frostbite that night. Now, whenever the wind howls or a door creaks in a quiet house, he doesn't look for ghosts. He looks for the man with the iron key, waiting for the fire to go out. Second story. The gravity of silence. The fog in the Scottish Highlands was so thick it felt like breathing wet wool. Alexa, a PhD student looking for total silence to finish her thesis, had rented The Croft, a stone cottage 3 miles from the nearest paved road. The listing had promised total disconnection. It didn't mention that the disconnection was a trap. By the 3rd night, the silence began to feel heavy. Alexa sat at the small wooden desk, the glow of her laptop the only light in the room. She reached for her phone to check the time, but the screen stayed black. It wasn't just out of battery, the charging port looked like it had been filled with industrial glue. Her heart gave a small, uncomfortable thump. She hadn't done that. She stood up to check the front door. Locked. But as she turned back, she noticed something on her laptop screen. A new file sat on her desktop, titled, watch_me.mp4. Alexa's fingers trembled on the trackpad. She opened it. The video was a single, static shot of her sleeping in the very bed behind her. It had been filmed from the rafters above. In the video, a shadow moved. A tall, thin man in a yellow raincoat leaned over her, sniffing her hair, before placing a small, silver object on her nightstand. Alexa slowly turned her head. There, on the nightstand, was her own house key. The one she thought was in her pocket. Click. The sound came from the kitchen, the sound of a burner on the gas stove being turned on. The hiss of gas filled the air. Alexa didn't scream. Her throat had closed up. She realized the skeletal manager she had met at the village store wasn't just a local, he was the one who owned this cottage. He had built it as a cage. She heard a voice, muffled by the stone walls, coming from the floorboards beneath her feet. The fog is too thick to run, Alexa. If you go out there, you'll walk off the cliff side. If you stay in here, the gas will put you to sleep. It's a very polite way to die, don't you think? Alexa felt the panic rising like bile. She looked at the windows, bolted from the outside with iron bars. She looked at the gas stove. She had minutes before the room became a bomb. She didn't try to break the door. Instead, she grabbed her heavy ceramic French press and smashed the laptop screen. She took the jagged, broken shard of the screen. The glass was thin and razor-sharp. She remembered the floorboards. If he was speaking from below, there was a cellar. And if there was a cellar, there was a hatch. She found it under the rug, a heavy iron ring. She pulled, but it was locked from the other side. The clank of the lock alerted him. "Naughty," the voice whispered from right under her feet. Alexa didn't keep pulling. She grabbed her bottle of high-proof whiskey from the counter, poured it over the rug, and struck her lighter. The rug ignited. She wasn't trying to burn the house down, she was forcing him out. The hatch flew open as the man scrambled to put out the fire, gasping from the smoke. Alexa didn't hesitate. She didn't act like a victim. As his head emerged from the cellar, she swung the heavy stone French press with every ounce of terror-fueled strength she had. It caught him square in the temple. He tumbled back into his own dark hole. Alexa jumped over the flames, ran to the mudroom, and grabbed the one thing she knew could save her, her emergency GPS beacon. She triggered it, then climbed out through the small, high-ventilation window in the pantry, tearing her skin on the stone. She spent the night huddled in a crevice in the rocks, 50 yards from the house, clutching a kitchen knife and watching the cottage burn into a glowing ember in the fog. She stayed so still her limbs went numb, watching the yellow raincoat figure crawl out of the burning ruins, calling her name in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. When the mountain rescue helicopter finally broke through the fog at dawn, they found Alexa sitting perfectly still, eyes wide, staring at the ruin. The man was gone, leaving only a trail of bloody footprints leading deep into the bottomless peat bogs. Alexa never finished her thesis. She moved to a high-rise in the loudest part of London, where the silence could never find her again.